Ambition and hard work are not enough to keep a newspaper running.
The most popular title in exotic Vanuatu today nearly shared the fate of its many forgotten predecessors.
But fate had other plans, thanks to an unexpected reunion and a phone book.
What followed was even more interesting, and not always safe. Welcome to the Media History Podcast.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for reading. My name is Małgorzata Dwornik.
And I am Bartłomiej Dwornik.
We are from the Reporterzy.info online magazine.
We are going to tell you a story about Vanuatu Daily Post.
30 years of struggle, including fistfights for free media. In the South Pacific, between Australia, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Fiji, lies an archipelago whose culture dates back 3,300 years. In the late 16th or early 17th century, the great warrior Roy Mata united the islanders of that time. His memory and legends still live on today, and his tomb has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In 1606, Portuguese explorer Pedro Fernandes de Queiroz named the islands Terra Australis del Espírito Santo, southern land of the Holy Spirit. In 1768, French navigator Louis-Antoine de Bougainville called them the Great Cyclades, and 6 years later, Captain James Cook renamed them the New Hebrides. This name remained in use until July 30th, 1980, when, following the Coconut War, the independent Republic of Vanuatu was established. From 1887, France and Britain jointly governed the islands, and in 1906, they created a British-French condominium. As a result, both French and English have long been official languages. Since the Republic was founded, Bislama, an English-based Creole language, has also been officially recognized.
The trading post shows promise.
Since 1980, several attempts had been made to establish a national newspaper. Unfortunately, the ruling elite's desire to control editorial content led to owners quickly abandoning their ventures. It wasn't until Mark Neil Jones took on the challenge that things changed, though the beginning was far from easy. In 1993, he came across an A3-sized brochure with a handful of generic information and ads. It contained no local news and was called The Trading Post. He liked it, so he bought it and became its publisher. Mark, a journalist and native Englishman, arrived in Vanuatu in 1989 from Papua New Guinea, where he had worked as an advertising and marketing manager. At the time, he was 33 years old. He started a small business and gradually expanded it. He saw many newspapers come and go, but decided to take the risk. It wasn't easy. He was a foreigner. However, the then Prime Minister not only granted him permission to run the newspaper, but also supported his efforts. Fueled with enthusiasm, Mark got to work. But enthusiasm alone wasn't enough. Money was also needed, and soon it ran out. Troubles followed. No funds, bank demands, and a personal family tragedy led him into depression. The journalist lost interest in his work. That was when local businessman Gene Wong and financial controller Richard Holstein stepped in. They provided funding and told him,
"Do what you do best, and we will take care of the finances."
And so it happened. Wong and Neil Jones had known each other from Papua New Guinea, where they had collaborated. Their reunion not only saved Mark financially, but also personally.
A financial lifeline through a phone book.
Later in 1993, in Port Vila, the trio founded Trading Post Limited. They focused on promotion, distribution, printing capabilities, and attracting advertisers. Although the company initially had only 3 employees, by the end of the year, it had grown. Alongside Neil Jones, local reporter and future politician Calvao Molly joined, as well as Philip Malas, who became a printer and later a successful businessman, and office manager Letty Kaltonga, a government public relations officer. the bulletin retained the format and name Trading Post. It was published weekly, and the company secured its first financial stability by winning a contract to redesign the telephone directory. Molly and Neil Jones gradually introduced new content. Initially, they covered world and regional news, then minor local stories, and finally, major political topics. These were sourced from a highly credible figure: Anglican priest, the country's first prime minister, and former Golden Press editor Walter Linney. By 1994, a gossip column called Mi Harem Se, My Harem Sees, had launched, quickly becoming the most popular column in all newspapers at the time. The editors soon became investigative journalists, as the country was rife with scandals. That same year, Gene Wong and Richard Holstein officially became company partners, and Trading Post began publishing twice a week. Its circulation grew to 2,000 copies.
Anti-government label, but a friendly prime minister.
Interest in the Post grew rapidly, as it provided a different kind of news compared to other papers. Neil Jones refused to let anyone influence the newsroom. As a result, delivering independent news and information was not easy. Almost every article about the government was scrutinized by the Prime Minister's spokesperson and personal secretary, and Trading Post was soon labeled an anti-government newspaper. Due to reports on issues like the deportation of immigrants, French government advisors began obstructing the paper, threatening to shut it down unless articles were published in French. Neil Jones resisted, responding that
It wouldn't make sense because most of my readers speak English.
the Prime Minister, still supportive, calmed his staff. A foreigner's perspective on the country's affairs led to more stories, sometimes controversial opinions, and a growing influx of journalists eager to join the newsroom. Trading Post's position strengthened, allowing it to expand its team. In 1995, journalist Len Garay, who had previously freelanced for Neil Jones, joined permanently. As a photographer, he enhanced the paper's visuals and quickly rose through the ranks to become editor-in-chief. A year later, in 1996, Vanuatu's first ombudsman, Marie-Noëlle Ferrier-Patterson, began publishing reports on corruption and government misconduct. Interest in the Post surged.
Attacks on journalists, threats, fists, and a chair.
In 1997, the company acquired an offset printing machine, the only one in the country. Printing efficiency soared, and Trading Post switched to a tabloid format. By 1999, the protective umbrella of Prime Minister Maxime Carlo-Corman had vanished. He lost the election. His successor, Barak Sopi, was far less tolerant. Threats and physical attacks on journalists began. One of the most serious incidents occurred after a series of court reports were published. During a meeting with Deputy Prime Minister Willie Jimmy at a local club, the subject of one article attacked Mark Neil Jones, using a chair and his fists. The attacker was restrained, and the bruised editor returned home without planning to file a complaint. However, the Deputy Prime Minister later called and threatened to burn down the newsroom if the incident was reported. Mark changed his mind and published everything.
We cannot and will not accept threats and intimidation when we are simply doing our job.
Readers admired the editor's stance and courage, supporting Trading Post's fight for a better Vanuatu, free press, and freedom of speech.
Deportation and return of the editor-in-chief. Meet Vanuatu Daily Post.
The new Prime Minister had a different opinion. He disliked the articles in the Post. In January 2001, after further reports on government corruption and the falsification of bank guarantees, Barak Sope issued a deportation order for Mark Neil Jones for publishing and disclosing confidential government secrets. At 6 a.m., a group of police officers stormed his home and escorted him to the airport without luggage, medication, insulin, or money, putting him on a flight to Australia. Mark left, but the newspaper remained open. The entire responsibility was taken over by Len Garay, supported by his colleague Kiri Manasseh. Both journalists and the ombudsman fought for their publisher's return to Port Vila. When Ferrier Patterson presented a report on the deportation and proved that everything written in the newspaper was true, the Chief Justice overturned the order, and Neil Jones returned to Vanuatu later that same January, greeted at the port by a cheering crowd of readers. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Upon Neil Jones's return, the publishing house resumed its work with double the strength. On September 18, 2001, a third edition day of the Post was introduced. The same day, a new weekly newspaper, Port Vila Press, was launched. In 2002, the first weekly newspaper for the entire Pacific region, Pacific Weekly Review, was introduced. In May 2003, the newspaper was renamed from Trading Post to Vanuatu Daily Post, and additional editions were introduced, making it a daily newspaper. The same day, the website vanuatudaily.com was launched. A new title, daily editions, and new challenges, all to mark the newspaper's 10th anniversary. It survived and became the only daily newspaper and the only private newspaper in the entire country. Mark Neil Jones once again took the editor-in-chief's seat, stating,
"The decision to take over from Mr. Garay is necessary to have greater control over the newspaper's content. The time has come for a daily newspaper, as there is enough news at home and abroad to publish an informative and educational daily paper for the entire country. One that will have more opportunities to include positive news as well as address pressing concerns affecting the nation."
By 2003, the newspaper employed 32 people, including 17 full-time staff. Almost all were at risk of attacks, mainly from disgruntled authorities. Among the full-time employees in 2001 was graphic designer and illustrator Douglas Patterson, a resident of Port Vila since 1986. The Post gained an unconventional perspective on current events, politics, and culture through him. His caricatures and humorous illustrations entertained readers, while the regular comic strip Cranky Kona, which still exists today, became the newspaper's signature feature. Every 3 years, a book compiling Patterson's cartoons, The Best of Cranky Kona Vanuatu, is published. The series now has 7 editions. Over time, Patterson also began writing articles, not always satirical.
First with information, first in color, and first with problems.
In September 2003, Neil Jones was attacked again. After a series of articles about the management of the Vanuatu Maritime Authority, VMA, a group of supporters of the agency's president assaulted the journalist. The president was present, but did not actively participate in the attack. The case was reported to the police and taken to court, where the verdict favored the newspaper and its editors. Daily Post journalists respected their boss and supported his efforts. He taught them to practice open, honest, and fearless journalism. They reported not only on corruption and government fraud, but also on drug trafficking, the first transgender person on the islands, the development of tourism, and destructive diseases, informing people on how to protect themselves. They educated the public. Young readers learned about their culture, language, and unique flora and fauna. Older readers who farmed coconuts or coffee received advice on how to protect their crops from cyclones or droughts. They explained economics and business matters. They didn't forget entertainment, especially sports. The range of topics expanded, as did the number of columns and entire sections. Over time, like newspapers worldwide, and as the first in Vanuatu, the Post transitioned to full-color printing in 2005. In 2006, another serious incident involving the newspaper occurred. Samuel Taffo, the sports editor, was attacked by a police officer during a rugby match between the police and the armed forces. The incident was reported in the newspaper, and 2 days later, the police rugby team stormed the newsroom. Mark Neil Jones was arrested on charges of improper vehicle operation. While awaiting a court decision, he spoke with fellow detainees. He was the only white prisoner and was initially apprehensive. But he soon realized he was well known and supported even behind bars. He learned how prisoners were treated by the police and about their detention conditions. Shackles and beatings were just the beginning of their ordeal. He promised to help them. After his release, he described and published everything. His articles about human rights violations in prisons led to changes in prison policies. 3 years later, after publishing similar articles, a group of police officers stormed the newsroom and beat the editor-in-chief, breaking his nose and threatening to slit his throat. The perpetrators were never arrested, and the ringleader was later promoted to head of a police station.
Promoting tourism for free.
Neil Jones was deeply concerned about his country, not just politically. He had started a family there and wanted to grow old there. He admired the natural beauty and landscapes, so he focused on promoting tourism. In April 2009, he launched the magazine What to Do in Vanuatu. The monthly publication was, and still is, free and available at airports, hotels, restaurants, anywhere tourists might be. It provided guidance on what to see and experience, not just on the island of Efate, home to the capital, but across the entire island nation. None of the Post journalists, including editor-in-chief Kiri Manasseh, who took over from Neil Jones, gave up their fight for press freedom. The newspaper's editors became increasingly vocal not only about issues in Vanuatu but across the Pacific region. The newspaper gained popularity beyond its borders. Realizing that many citizens in Vanuatu spoke French, Daily Post journalists, with support from the European Union and the French Embassy, launched the weekly newspaper Le Hebdo du Vanuatu, Vanuatu Weekly, in 2008. The first issue was published on December 11th, targeting both locals and residents of New Caledonia. In 2010, as owner and chief publisher, Mark Neil Jones introduced several changes, along with improvements to the newspaper's layout, redesigning pages, and enhancing print quality. Royson Willey replaced Kiri Manasseh as editor-in-chief. Paul Jackson, a New Zealander, became CEO. Peter Stardley, an Australian, took over as advertising manager. Primo, a Filipino, became the printing manager. With such an international leadership team, the number of local journalists in the newsroom grew. The core editorial team, alongside Royson Willey and Len Garay, included Godwin Ligo, Jonas Colwick, Jane Joshua, and a strong group of freelancers, including Ricky Binihi, Bob McKinn, Thompson Marango, Raymond Nasse, Glenda Shing, and Anita Roberts. Journalists gained experience not only in the newsroom, which was fully computerized by 2012, but also in broadcasting. Trading Post Limited launched 96 Buzz FM, with its first show airing on October 12, 2012.
Minister in the newsroom, leading a gang of thugs.
The newspaper, its journalists, and its publisher did not yield to pressure from the ruling elite. They kept a close eye on events, remained vigilant, and reported all discrepancies they uncovered. As a result, they were continuously harassed by the police. Personal searches, work obstructions, and intimidation were just some of the tactics used against them. In March 2011, Mark Neil Jones faced the most brutal attack yet. At the beginning of the month, Vanuatu Daily Post published several articles on how Minister of Public Infrastructure Harry Yauko handled certain issues, including matters related to Airports Vanuatu Limited, an aviation company closely tied to the government. These reports did not sit well with the minister. On March 7th, leading a group of 7 men, he stormed into the newspaper's offices. They didn't care that journalists were present. The men attacked the publisher, strangling, kicking, and beating him. When editor Royson Willey attempted to assist the unconscious director, he was met with the minister's own words.
"Do you want me to break your face?"
A medical examination was conducted, and the attack was reported to the police. The next day, the newspaper published a full account of the incident, along with photos of the battered mark. Media organizations such as the Pacific Freedom Forum, the International Federation of Journalists, and Reporters Without Borders all stood in solidarity with the newspaper, its editor, and all journalists in Vanuatu, condemning the actions of the minister and the government, which remained silent on the matter. The case went to court, but the minister did not lose his position. Instead, he was merely fined 15,000 vatu, equivalent to 120 euros.
I can't name many countries where a government minister would last long after storming into a national newspaper. With a gang of thugs employed by his ministry and attacking the publisher of the country's daily newspaper just because he didn't like legitimate criticism from the public, via letters to the editor.
Neil Jones said in an interview on the Pacific Media Center website, "Reporters Without Borders expressed their outrage.
It is unacceptable that a government minister received such a small fine for assaulting a journalist who criticized him. The fine is not proportionate to the gravity of the offense. We call on the court to reconsider this verdict in order to protect the media."
The Secretary General of the Vanuatu Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, VANGO, stated,
"The attack on the publisher was an insult to press freedom and to the channels that civil society relies on to provide a balanced perspective on key issues."
Prosecutor Kayleen Tavoa added,
Normally, a case involving a high-profile public figure assaulting a member of the media would be referred to the Supreme Court. That's what most lawyers said. That's what prosecutors said. And then, suddenly, everything changed.
The end of the Neil Jones era.
Unfortunately, despite external criticism, the government's stance toward the media did not change. In its weekly column, Judiciary, the Post continued publishing opinions and commentary on good governance, accountability, transparency, and anti-corruption efforts. Attacks on journalists and the newspaper did not cease. Nevertheless, the Vanuatu Daily Post editorial team continued its work and even expanded. In April 2014, with support from the United States, the Post became the first newspaper in the Pacific to transition to a content management system for managing its content.
This will truly revolutionize the way we integrate the newspaper with the website, tablet and mobile versions, and radio news, all within a single system,
said Mark Neil Jones. A few weeks later, a redesigned website and a new version of the printed newspaper were launched. In September that same year, the first issue of the magazine Vanuatu Life and Style was released, highlighting the country, its people, and their challenges. The newspaper's journalists supported and assisted those looking to settle in Vanuatu. Topics covered not only work and health, but also appropriate dress codes, safety, mobile phones, and internet access. A year later, in July 2015, another monthly publication was launched, this time a business magazine. Through Vanuatu Business Review, journalists educated and supported readers on financial matters, the economy, and business development opportunities. They also published various business reports on companies operating in the islands. In September 2015, an altercation took place outside the courthouse. Another minister, this time the Minister of Foreign Affairs, attacked a Post photojournalist after being questioned over a bribery case aimed at toppling the government. Articles on the matter had, of course, been published in the newspaper. Many witnesses, including Editor-in-Chief Royson Willey, were present. Yet the police did not intervene. Tired of constant harassment and attacks, Mark Neil Jones announced his departure from the company in December 2015.
After 26 years in Vanuatu and 22 years spent growing our media company from a small 3-person operation into a large, diversified and successful media organization, employing over 40 people across print, radio, online, outdoor advertising, and now cutting-edge digital signage and touchscreen displays, the time has unfortunately come for me to step back from daily management. I made the independent decision to retire because my health has deteriorated significantly over the past 3 years. First threats within 30 minutes.
The founder of Vanuatu Daily Post decided to focus on tourism development and expand his secret garden resort, which he had been running with his wife and son. He did not completely cut ties with journalism, remaining on the Trading Post board and overseeing the free tourism supplement What to Do in Vanuatu. His role in Trading Post LT as media director was taken over by Canadian journalist Dan McGarry. When McGarry took over from Neil Jones, Vanuatu Daily Post had a circulation of 4,000 copies, a strong result for the 50,000 residents of Port Vila, considering that both then and now, the newspaper is only available in the capital and sustains itself mainly through advertising. McGarry had arrived in Vanuatu in 2003 as an internet technology consultant assisting social organizations. As a journalist and photographer, he soon began collaborating with local newspapers, including The Post. Upon taking over as media director, he received threats within half an hour, but that didn't stop him. His investigative articles, like those of his predecessor, angered the government. Accusations of defamation and slander persisted, despite the evidence he presented. He also continued his photography, contributing many images to the newspaper. Alongside Willie, he wrote about the nation's struggles and its people, fighting for freedom of speech and press.
Media freedom is everyone's freedom,
they said. The newspaper tackled difficult topics while ensuring shocking but truthful headlines, fact-checking, a sense of human decency, healthy media through discussions and debates, collaboration with other media outlets. Thanks to this collaboration, the two journalists announced the publication of the newspaper's 5,000th issue on January 25, 2017. It was a major achievement for such a small country with so many rough roads. McGarry and Willie worked together until February 2018. In March, the editorial leadership passed to a woman, Jane Joshua, a longtime journalist for The Post.
the first woman at the helm of Vanuatu Daily Post.
Joshua learned the craft of journalism at the Post. She came from a poor family that could not afford to educate its children in prestigious schools. But the ambitious and talented young woman never gave up. She started at the newspaper as a junior and worked her way up to becoming a journalist through hard work. She wrote about social injustices, human rights, and prison conditions. She thoroughly covered the investigative commission's work on the sinking of the MCY ship, which led to a murder charge against the captain and ultimately resulted in maritime sector reforms. In February 2019, thanks to Joshua's efforts, the Post launched weekly Monday news in Chinese. Business director Peter Stadley explained.
Introducing Chinese language news reflects the community we serve. A large part of the Chinese community is not comfortable reading in English, but is interested in local news. We are confident that this initiative will increase readership of our Monday edition.
The same version of the news was simultaneously published online. At the time she took over the editorial team, Jane Joshua had written nearly 300 articles. For her commitment to defending women's rights, she received the Australian government's Hanson Mataskalekele Award for Women's Leadership in March 2018. Joshua also promoted women in journalism. In September 2019, Anasilini Natoga from Fiji was appointed as head of the sports section. This was a significant step, as women rarely hold such positions.
Ms. Natoga was previously the deputy sports editor at Fiji Sun. She brings 10 years of experience, a passion for sports, and expertise in sports reporting. She has extensive experience covering all aspects of sports and will take on expanded responsibilities as Daily Post and Buzz FM work to provide our listeners and readers with broader coverage and new formats.
the newspaper informed its audience. Natoga had covered major sporting events, including the Pacific Mini Games in 2013, 2015, and 2019 in Papua New Guinea, Apia, and Samoa, the Rio 2016 Olympics, and the 2018 Commonwealth Games in Gold Coast. In 2015, the Oceania National Olympic Committees named her a sports media champion under the Women in Sports Development Program in Doha, Qatar, and a year later at the Pacific Media Summit in Palau.
The publishing director with a black mark from the government, of course.
Some foreigners come, while others are forced to leave. In November 2019, the Vanuatu authorities refused to renew the work permit and entry visa of Post Director Dan McGarry, who was attending a conference in Australia at the time. Like all non-citizens, he needed a valid work permit, which expired that November. Despite having a family from the islands, his application for an extension and even a temporary stay was denied. Vanuatu's Commissioner of Labour, Muriel Meltenoven, stated that the decision was based on policies promoting local employment.
A work permit requires foreign applicants to present a training plan for a Vanuatu citizen who could replace them,
she said. McGarry had not done so, and according to the Commissioner, Jane Joshua was his designated successor. In an interview with The Guardian, McGarry stated,
"We all know the real reason. The Daily Post's coverage of government actions made them so uncomfortable that they were willing to abuse administrative procedures to silence me. In July, the Prime Minister called me in and scolded me for my negative reporting. If you don't like it here, he told me, go home."
McGarry had lived in Port Vila for 16 years, where he had built his home and family. McGarry was convinced that the reason for his expulsion was his series of articles from July 2019 on the deportation of 6 Chinese citizens from Vanuatu and China's influence on the country's politics. He filed an appeal. The Vanuatu Media Association supported his right to stay, stating it was
saddened by the government's actions, which failed to use other available options to resolve its issues with Daily Post articles. These events represent a level of intervention never before experienced by the media industry. MAV urges the Honourable Prime Minister to ensure that Dan McGarry has full access to all legal procedures available to arrange his documents.
The Media, Entertainment and Arts Alliance, Australian Journalists Union, described the incident as a troubling development that raises concerns about press freedom and the public's right to information in Vanuatu. The battle for McGarry's return to his family lasted a month. On December 17th, Judge Gus Andre Wiltons ruled that the travel ban had no legal basis, but McGarry had to wait until 2023 for a new work permit.
This is a great victory for the Daily Post and a major win for independent media in Vanuatu. I am grateful to the owners of the Daily Post and to all my colleagues and friends who never wavered in their unwavering defense of our right to chart our own course. Unfortunately, it took me so long to get justice that I had to move on to other work. But this is a crucial principle worth defending,
said Dan McGarry, who now works as an investigative editor at the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project.
Vanuatu in the digital world.
While little has changed in Vanuatu's political landscape, Jane Joshua and her team continue working and fighting for their place in society. Both the print and digital editions of the newspaper reached nearly 500,000 readers. In June 2022, the newspaper launched a premium paid digital subscription service, Daily Post Digital Network, consisting of 6 unique content sites. In addition to the news website, the service includes Bainsel Vanuatu, a classifieds platform, VBR Online, digital business news, Buzz FM, 24/7 streaming and podcast archives, What's on Vanuatu, an entertainment and lifestyle portal, and What to Do, online tourism information. Summing up the innovation, Jean Wong stated,
"The time has come for Vanuatu to embrace the digital world and take advantage of faster access to news. By subscribing to our premium paid digital service, you support local journalists and an important profession.
The newspaper is also available on Facebook and Twitter. It informs, advises, educates, and entertains. In addition to news in Chinese, it also has a Spanish language page. It actively promotes the country. The Post is a member of the Pacific Media Assistance Scheme, where editors exchange experiences, learn new skills, and support one another. The results are tangible.
For the first time, I saw an issue from a different perspective by learning how other newspapers and editors work,
said Joshua after attending 2024 Years Conference on Rural Newspapers. On April 10, 2024, the newspaper celebrated its 7,000th issue. Although the Post's 30th anniversary was the previous year, this milestone issue became a symbol of the company's stability and a significant achievement in the fight for press freedom. The cake for the celebration was jointly cut by company founders and directors Gene Wong and Mark Neil Jones, along with editor-in-chief Jane Joshua, who lives by the motto,
"Do what you can, with what you have, and where you are."
Thank you for listening to our podcast.
Thanks for joining us on this journey to Vanuatu.
If you enjoyed it, give our podcast a thumbs up
Visit our channel for more videos in a variety of formats.
and subscribe us so we can let you know when the next episode is out. Goodbye and see you soon.
Goodbye and see you soon.